The octagon is empty. The final bell has rung, and the lights are dimming on another historic night of combat. But while the physical battle is over, the conversation is just beginning. From the championship shifts to the rising contenders, we now dissect every blow, every finish, and every major headline that came out of tonight's event. The dust has settled, but the fallout remains. Welcome to the Post-Fight Show with your host, Tom Albano.
All right, everyone. Welcome to UFC 330 Post-Fight Show. My name is Tom Albano. I'm your host, always here for every Post-Fight Show for the UFC Unforgettable Network. And good God Almighty, in the words of Tim Ross, 200. I mean, it catches me off guard every time, even though I know to expect it. But over 200 of you are already in here. I am so pumped. I am so glad that you all are here. I greatly appreciate it, and I never take your viewership for granted. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and I already see we haven't even begun this stream yet, and I already see the Islam Makhachev fans pouring on in celebration. Islam Makhachev retaining the welterweight championship in the main event of UFC 330 tonight, defeating Ian Garry. And on top of that, Islam Makhachev making UFC history. Now, the longest win streak in the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. His last victory, where he won the welterweight title, that tied him with the legendary former middleweight champion Anderson the Spider Silva. That record is now broken, and it is in the sole possession of the Khabib Nurmagomedov protege, the former lightweight champion and now current and still, UFC welterweight champion, Islam Makhachev. So we've got a lot that we're going to break down, and we had another title on the line too, in Mackenzie Dern retaining her championship. Just as dominant, if not a more dominant fashion of a victory over Gillian Robertson. We'll talk about that. And then I feel like Philadelphia became upset city when looking at some of these highlights and some of these finishes from the preliminary card and the undercard, because there were a lot of things that I did not expect. There were some things that I expected to happen, and then there were just some things that just completely even caught me off guard. Our bonus best bet hit. One of our actual best bets hit. My prediction was correct in Islam Makhachev retaining the championship by decision, but unfortunately, it did not work. When my little risk on the -9.5 DraftKings style did not work. But nevertheless, we are here. We're here to talk all things UFC 330. But before we get into everything, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you got notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. It is a time of celebration here at the ETB Network because we have just hit 3,000 watch hours. We have hit over 1,160 subscribers. And the only people we can thank for that is each and every single one of you for tuning in, giving your time, and allowing us to entertain you, or just us allowing us to, inform you, or just putting up with us. It's all about you. We want to thank each and every single one of you out there. So hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and then, of course, don't forget to ring the notification bell so that way you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. That's every edition of Fight IQ, every Fight IQ, the Puncher's Chance, every pre-show and post-show for the UFC numbered cards. And yeah, if I don't cover anything on tonight's stream, you'll see me again on Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and we'll go over everything there. All right. And okay, we're just having all the flock come in. Come on in, people. Over 300 of you now tuning in for tonight's stream. Shout out to all of you, and shout out especially all of you who are watching on our X platforms that we are broadcasting out to. Want to thank you guys so much. Hit like, hit repost, quote post, or retweeting and quote tweet, as us old heads like to say when we remember that it was still a time where it was called Twitter. Feel free to share comments. Like I said, we just had a couple of people already, Islam fans, commenting and celebration for Islam Makhachev's title retaining. So feel free to share your thoughts on tonight's card. Good card, mid card, bad card, anything surprise you? Feel free to shout it out. And then, of course, after you folks on X are done, make sure to come to the YouTube home for the ETV Network, home base, youtube.com/ETV Network. And again, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button and help us grow. All right. But also, before we get anything else, make sure to follow the network at ETB Network. Make sure to follow the show at Fight IQ ETB. And make sure to follow me across social media at Thomas J. Albano. Of course, Zan Bando joined us for the pre-show. He's not here for post-show. You will see Zan, however, tomorrow morning or later this morning, depending on where you are in the world. 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific for Zan Zinger Part 2. During that show, he will give his take on the main event, the co-main event, and everything else that he noticed and everything that he will, everything that caught his attention. Christy says, pretty good card. Glad you enjoyed it, Christy. Yeah, for a card that, and then here's the other thing, and Zan and I talked about this on the pre-show. For a card that did not look great on paper, this is just one of those circumstances where, again, you see how some of these fights play out, and it's much different. There were some exceptions. The Chidi and Dragani Joel Alvarez fight was not great. You can even make the arguments that the two title fights were not great, simply because, if you're an Islam fan, obviously you are very happy. If you're a Mackenzie Dern fan, you're obviously very happy. I would even argue potentially if you're a Weili Zhang fan, you are very happy. But like I said, the top two fights, debatable in terms of quality and in terms of competition because they were clear decisions. Having said that, as I kind of hinted, it seemed like the early card, the prelims made up for it. The other fights on the main card made up for it. This was a really fun card. I don't know if I would say that this tops the White House. I don't know if I would say if it tops that card from Belgrade a couple of weeks ago where you had a number of first-round finishes and nearly all of the fights actually ended up being finishes. But this was still a better than expected card. But let's get right into it. Let me see where's my banners. Okay, there they are. I'm like, where the hell did everything go? All right, here's your main event. Ian Garry challenged Islam Makhachev for the UFC welterweight championship. Unfortunately for the Irish-born star, it did not go his way. As I mentioned at the start, the big headline of tonight, Islam Makhachev retaining his championship, and now he breaks a tie that he had with Anderson Silva. New solo record for the longest win streak in the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. That marks 17 straight wins for Makhachev. He's only got one loss on his UFC record, one loss just in general in professional mixed martial arts. Ian Garry also had one loss coming into this fight. He's now at 2. He's now lost 2 of his last 4. But, you had this fight, and then you had him taking a short notice fight, a short notice title eliminator, or in more layman's terms or professional wrestling terms, a number 1 contenders match. And again, he took that fight on short notice, and that was against Shavkat Rakhmonov. As I said earlier on the pre-show, it's just a real shame what's been going on with Shavkat, and we haven't been able to see him. And Ian Garry took this opportunity. Came into this opportunity off a win over another former welterweight champion in Bilal Muhammad in November. Islam actually fought the week before at the Madison Square Garden in 2025, defeating Jack Della Maddalena. And it looked like on the surface that this fight could have been a little closer when compared to what you saw with the JDM fight. It's weird because in some ways this fight ended up being as expected. And then there were some ways where this fight took me a little bit by surprise. So as I mentioned, on Monday's edition of Fight IQ, and as I mentioned during the pre-show with Zan, the strategy it seemed to come down to was Ian Garry's length and his reach. And you think about the length and reach that he has. He's got a pretty big body. I would say a little big for welterweight, but ultimately he has used that to his success because that's been one of his keys. When he's in fights and he's able to try not to move too much because I don't have too much wiggle room in the place where I am broadcasting from. It's always been that reach that's allowed him to pop that jab out there, land those blows, land to the body, and he's been able to use that length to set things up. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe he needs to try and do that. But I was taken a little bit by surprise by the fact that he didn't really do much with that entering the fight. We go to that first round, and he seems to not use the distance as much. He's not completely in close where he's completely like this. Jesus, that is creepy. To go up to the close and try to land on the inside. He did that later on, but not at the start. And then all it took was a high kick. Makhachev used a high kick about a minute in. Ian Garry blocks it, but that's enough to take Ian Garry off of his game. Makhachev shoots in, scores that takedown. And he's able to get up, but he's not able to get out of the grasp of Islam Makhachev. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe, just maybe, this is going to result in a pretty clear one-sided decision. And yet I didn't really hear too many boos coming from that crowd. And simply because, Islam Makhachev had a huge fan base out in Philadelphia. There were a number of people who came out. He had a huge fan base. Trying to look to see who else had a huge fan. Oh, Jeremiah Wells, obviously, he had a big fan base. Jeremiah Wells, who competed on the early prelims from Philadelphia, although he got booed during his entrance. So I was a little shocked by that. But there was a crowd that was out there for Oral By. Dante Johnson set the crowd on fire. We'll talk about Edson Barboza, of course, but we'll talk about all of them later on. So first round ends up playing out, and it seems likely, okay, this is going to go to a decision, and this is going to be one of these fights where, it's just going to be pretty dominant. Maybe not like Jack Della Maddalena level, but it's like, okay, it's tipping towards that point. Second round, he didn't really do enough again, Ian Garry, of that distance management. He wasn't completely wide out. He wasn't on the other side of the octagon while Islam Makhachev is, on the opposite of him. But I feel like he still had more range to work with. Hopefully everyone knows understands what I'm trying to say. He had more range to work with than what actually was there. So he tried to use his striking. He tried to work with his range, but it just wasn't enough. Makhachev was still able to get inside. Makhachev still was able to, easily eliminate the distance. Oh my God, we're over 500 people. We're only 15 minutes in. We're only a quarter of the way through this show. And then Ian Makhachev was able to easily bring Ian Garry to the ground. And that was after the head kick that landed. And so then my instinct thought, okay, This is less like the Jack Della Maddalena fight, and it's looking like the second fight with Alexander Volkanovski. And that's where you saw danger. Makhachev had Ian Garry on the ground. He was threatening submission attempts. He had one choke in the front. He had a rear naked choke attempt. He was going for a ground and pound, but Ian Garry somehow managed to survive. And I guess the one gripe I would have about the scorecards and about my -9.5 play from the best bet from Deadspin, I thought maybe you could have given round 2 10-8. Potentially, just because of the damage that was landing. But I guess it was because, there were more submission attempts and Ian Garry managed to fight those off. Maybe didn't present the kind of danger like we're going to talk about in one of the rounds for the co-main event, the women's title fight, that all three judges still scored a 10-9. And then Islam Makhachev grabbed Ian Garry's leg during round 3. The first half of round 3 was pretty quiet. It was like, you talk about ebbs and flows. This was a real quiet point. And I thought, I guess both the guys are going to take round 3 off. And then Makhachev grabs Ian Garry's leg, and he goes for yet another takedown attempt. But what's interesting is Garry ends up fighting out of it. What he does is, as Islam Makhachev is trying to go to the ground, Garry's using the shoulder and managing to work over the shoulder and use it for leverage, meaning Islam Makhachev's shoulder. And sure enough, he's able to stand up, he's able to get to the back, and he's able to, stand his ground. At that point, he's landing jabs, landing kicks to the body. He's finally starting to work from range. He's finally starting to do the strategy that could have given him more success in this fight. So we go in to round 4, the championship rounds. I agreed with just about everybody else. It was 2-1. It was 2-1 for me. Then you go to round number 4, and Islam Makhachev actually scores, I think, 3 takedowns during that fight. Yeah, there was some trading in that round. Islam went for another takedown, but Ian Garry was ready. He did the shoulder strategy again, but to Islam's credit, he was ready for that. And he countered. He got right to Ian Garry's back. And he did a lot of controlling of the action against the fence. There was a lot of debate on commentary. Jose, I see your comment. I'm going to get to it in just a little bit. I'm in the middle of trying to recap the fight, and then I will get to the comments. 3 takedowns in the round, but there were a lot of debate on the commentary side of things because there was a question thrown out there to them about, could Ian Garry have maybe won the round because of all the damage that he was doing to the head, to the body. You actually saw blood on Ian Garry's chest, and it seemed to come from Islam Makhachev's face, and he was a little battered around the face. Having said that, Ian Garry tried to continue that success, used that striking in round 5, but Islam Makhachev scores one more takedown about halfway through the round, and the result is him controlling the rest of the fight from that point. You had 49-46, 49-46, and 48-47. I will say Ian Machado Garry put up a hell of a fight, better than I expected. I will say that Ian Machado Garry put up a strong performance. I think if he... I will talk... I get it. I will talk about Islam and Morales as a matchup in just a second. In 1 minute. Talk about Islam Makhachev and Ian Garry's fight here. I think he could have done more. I think Ian Garry could have won this fight if and only if he had started to execute that strategy and work distance and range management a little sooner. I feel like he didn't do enough of that in the first 2 rounds. Now, maybe that's just because Islam Makhachev is just that damn good. But that's where, if I have to pick a point, that's where the downfall of Ian Garry was. Whether it's he did not do that or he could not do that because of Islam Makhachev. Now, as I mentioned earlier, big win for Islam Makhachev. He breaks the record. That he shared with Anderson Silva. He successfully defends a welterweight title. He's now successfully won and defended championships in both weight classes. And now there's no debating it because Ilya lost it at the White House. Alex lost at the White House. I think at this point, there's no debating it. Islam Makhachev is the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. All right. Now I see your comment. Now I will talk about it. What comes next for Islam Makhachev? Because that is the question at this point. I know you say Islam versus Morales, but I think the point here is who is going to be next. Where do we go from here, Ozai? So I want to say Michael Morales simply for the matter that he was next in line. He weighed in as the backup. But regardless of who it is, I know Carlos Prates has a lot of power. And I know that Michael Morales flashes a lot of power. I don't know which of those two, if either of those two are able to beat Islam Makhachev. I really haven't seen anybody really test him in the way that I don't speak Turkish, my friend. I'm sorry. I don't understand. I don't really see where or understand where somebody could say that blank could be Islam. I don't understand that because I feel like no one has tested him in the way that Alexander Volkanovski did in their first fight. Morales is an animal. Absolutely. I think Morales, here's what I will say about Morales. I think he gives a different test to Islam Makhachev, a lot more of a challenge than this fight with Ian Garry. I'm honestly kind of surprised that Ian Garry got the title shot in the first place. I thought that they were probably going to go with Morales or Prates. I mean, I get the appeal of Ian Garry. I get that appeal. And I guess this was a good test for him. And while Ian Garry showed some good stuff in this fight, he's not ready for a championship. And he's not ready for any sort of potential rematch with Islam. So when you're talking about a Morales versus Islam fight, I think that Morales is, like you say, Morales very big, very strong. And I think that will give Islam some problems. I think it'll be a very competitive fight. I don't think it'll be as one-sided as we saw tonight. I don't think it'll be one-sided like we saw in at 322 when he beat Jack Della Maddalena. I don't think so. I think, however, the question is going to come if Morales is ready for that wrestling. And that's, I think, my issue with just about a lot of the welterweight division, to be honest. I don't know who, if any of them, are really ready for the wrestling and the grappling that's presented by Islam Makhachev and the relentless takedowns and pressure that he presents. Carlos Prates, I mean, Ian Machado Garry got, you don't always want to depend on MMA math, but Ian Machado Garry got kind of dominated tonight. Carlos Prates got dominated by Ian Machado Garry. If it wasn't for that fifth round, Prates could have gotten the victory. I don't see one of those two, Prates or Garry, was proven tonight, but I don't see Prates beating him. Michael Morales, Islam won't get more than one win here. I think he should retire. No, I'm at the point now where I want to see the ride happen. A lot of people will say, and I can agree with them, that, even if it was just a little bit too early, we did lose the career of Khabib Nurmagomedov a little too early for obvious and understandable reasons. I want to see Islam succeed, but he's not going back down to lightweight simply for the matter of I think Usman Nurmagomedov, you saw him in the crowd. I think that's the flashing of the sign, the wink and nudge. Usman Nurmagomedov is going to make his way from PFL/MVP, MVPFL to the UFC. So Islam's going to be there at welterweight. And I mean, what could be next for him is either going to be Pratis or Morales, because JDM, I don't want to see that fight again. Sean Brady and Gabriel Bonfim are now booked for a battle of top 10 contenders. They did announce that tonight. They announced 3 fights tonight. I believe Brady Bonfim has been announced for November. I think it's the November 7th card at the UFC Apex. Yeah, UFC Vegas 124. Leon's taking a fall. Buckley's taking a fall. Like I said, JDM, I don't want to see that matchup again. I'm going to agree with you, Jose, in that I think the next title challenger should be Michael Morales. I don't know if he wins, but between the two, and they showed Pratis Morales in the crowd at the end of that fight between Islam and Ian, I would lean to Morales. I know Pratis is the number 1 contender by proxy, but I think Morales is going to get the next title shot and maybe deserves the next title shot here. I love Khabib. I love Islam, but that's enough. Okay, then, I guess my question is going to be, and feel free to answer this while I continue on because I don't know when the comment's going to come in. I'm going to move on, but still feel free to chime in whenever. What about Umar Nurmagomedov? And what about Usman? I would hope you're not done with them, right? I know Umar's ranked number 2. For Umar, I think, unfortunately, he's going to be in a little bit of a waiting game right now because you got Peter versus Merab number 3. And if Peter Yan wins the fight, wins the trilogy, and retains the championship, the UFC, Ozai, and then just about everybody out there, if Peter Yan retains in October, Sean O'Malley's getting the next title shot. You know that. Even though he's ranked under Umar in the rankings, that Sean O'Malley will jump just because O'Malley has lost to Yan once. And then when they fought for the title, O'Malley dominated that fight. The UFC would love to get that belt back on O'Malley. That. And as far as Usman Nurmagomedov, he's going to the UFC. And it's going to be really interesting. Because, what's going to happen with Justin Gaethje? Ali Abdelaziz, the manager of Justin Gaethje and Islam Makhachev, what he did was he kind of stirred the pot a little bit and said, if Justin wants to retire, maybe he vacates the lightweight belt and challenges Islam. And that's the one wild card play here, I think. If Justin moves up and does his retirement fight with Islam, that could potentially, be a matchup there. And unfortunately for Pratis and Morales, they would get jumped in a situation like that. I get you, man. All chill, all good. Like I said, that might be the one wild card. But that's why I'm going to call it a wild card. I don't know if that's for certain because they showed Patty a lot late in the card. I don't know if that's the UFC maybe flashing, hey, they might be more interested if in Justin's next fight being a rematch with Patty, considering what Patty did to Benoit Saint Denis. I don't know, simply because that you've got that Mauricio Rufy, Armin Sarukian title eliminator that's coming up on the next card at 321 in California. Ian Garry turning heel on the Philadelphia crowd. I wouldn't really say he turned heel. I will say he's been very cringe in the media, Nick, this whole week, with some of the comments that he's made. I know James Lynch has been really going after him for the way that he's behaved towards media and how he told media at the media day, hey, I only want to answer questions about the fight. Zan and I kind of talked about that on the pre-show. Ozai, thank you for tuning in. Catch you around, and maybe one day, man. Maybe one day. as far as Ian Garry goes, I'm not too bothered. And I think he got a lot of good graces back from what he was able to do in the cage tonight. And he gave all the credits to Islam and respected Islam. I'm not too bothered with it. Let's move a little along here to the co-main event of the evening. This was also a pretty dominating performance from Mackenzie Dern. And going into this fight, if you thought Islam had a dominating performance, Mackenzie Dern really, really had a dominating fight. Her domination began right at the beginning. She overwhelmed Gillian Robertson. I think Robertson only landed 2 or 3 strikes in that whole fight. Christy, because of the timing that the comments come in, I don't know if that's in response to what Ian Garry and one of the comments that had the, people flustered, or if that's just because of me moving on to the women's title fight. As far as this fight goes, as I was saying, Mackenzie Dern dominated this one from the beginning. She showed why she was the jiu-jitsu queen. Now, during the pre-show with Zan, I had said I put more faith in the distance between Dern and her jiu-jitsu. Like she was better at jiu-jitsu than Robertson being better than Dern in striking. Well, you know what? This whole fight just told me that Mackenzie Dern's just better than Gillian Robertson in everything. And part of that might be because of the flag that I threw in and Zan and I talked about during the pre-show. That Gillian Robertson's last, several opponents, like 3, 4, 5 opponents, 0-19. A combined, each of them had lost their last 3, lost their last 3, lost their last 2. And to me, I just feel like that, okay, you're responding to the fight that I'm talking about. I figured, but I just wanted to make sure. I feel like Robertson only landed 2 or 3 strikes in that opening round, and it kind of set the tone from there, and it did not change. Both her takedown attempts were stuffed. Dern got right there. Arm bars, chokes, you name it. That continued on into round 2. Even more top control time from Dern. I think she had over 3 minutes in round 2. Robertson got a reversal, but she was on top for less than a minute, and it was really not enough. Now, Robertson, I will give credit to. She did have a better performance in round 3. Oh, my God. Shout out 700 plus of you watching combined between YouTube and X. My God. Thank you all so much. I always know that these kinds of streams do well, but still, I'm always taken aback every time. Over 700 people have tuned in tonight. Robertson's got her boxing going. Her striking started to get, a little bit of a pick-me-up. Her clinch work was there in round 3. It still didn't matter because Dern got the fight down to the ground anyway. And you saw Mackenzie Dern and her striking. And, I talked about it on the pre-show. But when Mackenzie Dern found Jason Perillo and joined up with him, ever since that point, some point around COVID, things really changed for her in terms of her striking. And she has developed into a really well-rounded overall fighter. And so her jiu-jitsu, her striking were on display. Another takedown in round 4, choking threat, armbar threat. Robertson had that last burst of energy, the knowing that her back was against the wall and that she needed some sort of finish. She goes at him. But Dern it just wasn't enough. It was Dern's weakest round, but I think Dern could easily, coast her way to the decision at that point. And credit to Robertson, she got to take down that round, but it wasn't going to be enough to do anything. So Mackenzie Dern, that's her first title defense. That's the first time she has fought since defeating Verna Jandiroba at UFC 321. But I want to look at something with those strawweight rankings because I do have a concern here. You know, Mackenzie Dern obviously is the champion. Weili Zhang is still listed as the number one contender, despite the fact that she unsuccessfully moved up to challenge at strawweight. You know, she lost to Valentina Shevchenko, and it seems like Weili is going to go back to strawweight. I just might be more blunt and say I think strawweight needs Weili Zhang to go back down. I mean, you look at Verna Jandiroba. Let's have a look at her. Let's look at the women who are ranked at this point. So Verna Jandiroba, the loss to Dern was the only loss in her last 7 fights. She's won 6 of her last 7. Tatiana Suarez, you know, she had a long hiatus from the cage due to all her health issues, and it was a real shame. But now she's won 2. You know, she unsuccessfully challenged Weili last year, but now she's defeated Amanda Lemos and Lupi Godinez. So not bad there. But if you look at let's look at Gillian Robertson and her fight history for people to understand what I'm talking about. You know, Gillian Robertson, her last win came against Amanda Lemos. She's lost her last 3 fights. Marina Rodriguez lost her last 3 fights and lost 5 of her last 6. I don't believe she's retired too, Marina Rodriguez. Luana Pinheiro, she's still around, but she's lost her last 4 fights. Michelle Waterson-Gomez, she's retired. And she lost her last 5 fights. She's lost 7 of her last 8 fights. Poliana Viana lost her last 4, 5 of her last 6. My point is, there's a reason when people like myself, James Lynch, Zan, flag opponent history, because there is something to be said about quality of opposition. And I think that, you know, and as Zan mentioned, you know, the Amanda Lemos of 2026 is not the Amanda Lemos of the early 2020s. It's not the Amanda Lemos who challenged Weili Zhang for the strawweight title at UFC 292. So when I'm looking at the rankings, you know, there's Verna, but I don't want to see that rematch. There's Tatiana. I don't know if she's ready for another shot. I think, first of all, if Weili Zhang is moving back down to strawweight like it's believed, she deserves the next title shot. She didn't lose the championship. She vacated it to chase for glory. Even though she didn't get it, she didn't defeat Valentina for the flyweight belt, she has still proven that she is a strawweight queen. As Zan and I have talked about before, the 3 women you're going to put at the top of the strawweight, you know, pedestal, it's Weili Zhang, it's Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and it's Rose Namajunas. And if you need a 4th person for a Mount Rushmore, maybe Carla Esparza, because she was the inaugural champion. That's your strawweight Mount Rushmore. So if Weili Zhang goes back down, she needs to challenge Mackenzie Dern. That will be a fun fight. And I'll do one better. I think the UFC women's strawweight division, they need Weili Zhang. You know, Weili Zhang versus Mackenzie Dern is such an intriguing matchup. It's a fun-sounding matchup. It's an interesting matchup on paper. I would love to see it actually play out. So that's my hope for what's next for her. Now, going into let's go into the rest of the main card. But before I do that, first of all, yes, Bori, as I said, the Islam contingency is all out here in celebration. And you know what? I don't blame them. Islam sets a new UFC record. He retains his championship. And he's proven why he is the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC right now. So, Islam Makhachev fans, cheers to you. I have my water right here. Cheers to you. It's celebration time, without a shadow of a doubt. Before we get into anything else in the last 20 minutes here, do want to talk about a huge accomplishment from the ETB side of things. The Empty the Bench Network is pleased to announce that the network has surpassed 3,000 watch hours on YouTube, and we cannot thank you, the viewers, for your outstanding support in making this milestone possible. Thanks to viewers like you, in the coming days and next week, we'll be rolling out all the details about our super chats, super stickers, super thanks, channel membership tiers, perks, merch store, and so much more. We thank you again for your support of ETB Network programming. Shout out to the 765 of you who have tuned in to tonight's program. Still got another 20 minutes or so to go for tonight. And shout out to all of you who have constantly supported the ETB Network one way or another, subscribing, watching shows. You deserve all our thanks. And again, in the words of John Anik, we don't take your viewership for granted. By the way, every time we cannot thank you, the viewers, and saying thanks to viewers like you. I know the international contingency outside the U.S. probably will not get this. When I read that, all I think of is the voiceovers from PBS. Viewers like you. All right, let's get to the action. Let's not talk about PBS on this show. Let's get back to the in-cage men's slamming action. Jalen Turner. Speaking of slamming, oh good God. I did not expect that this fight was gonna see, and I told Zan, I said, I gave him the John Cena meme, basically. I said, are you sure about this? He thought that this fight was going to go the distance. I'm like, Zan, you could read my facial expressions during the pre-show that I wasn't sure about this. I wasn't sure who was going to win. I thought that maybe Fernandez was going to put up a much better fight than he did here, but I guess the experience of Jalen Turner is just going to win out. 39 seconds. Count them, 39 seconds was all it took for Jalen Turner to win the fight. I am not even joking that most of the fight can be summed up like this. Leg kick from Fernandez. Circling, the pressure from Turner. Fernandez backing up. And then the left hand coming in. Wallop. Maybe I should be using this because for you guys, this is my left side, even though for me, this is my right. The mirror effect. Anyway, wallop. And Fernandez goes down. He crumbles. Just a couple of follow-up shots. And, well, yeah, that's all she wrote. A fat lady sung just like that. So, credit to Jalen Turner. Credit to Jalen Turner because that was a hell of a performance. And now, remember, it was just last year. It was a year and a half ago where Jalen Turner basically hung him up. He had lost to, he lost at UFC 300. He loses to Ignacio Bahamondes at UFC 313. It looks to be the end of his road. He comes back later on in November, and now he's won back-to-back fights. He's finished Edson Barboza. That was UFC 323. And now here at UFC 330, he knocks out Kelly Fernandez. And he got a performance bonus. He got a performance bonus on top of it. I should actually remind myself during the last few minutes of this stream, I need to go back and actually see who won the performance bonuses and if there was anything cool that Dana White said during the post-fight press conference. We'll do that. We'll read Aaron Bronstedter's report on Dana White's post-fight press conference when we're done with the main card here. But shout out to Jalen Turner. 39 seconds. That's the performance that he needs. And I wonder what's going to happen for him. He was tested against a veteran like Barboza. He was tested against a young up-and-comer like Fernandez. I think you put him against somebody pretty decent. And if he wins, maybe he gets right back into the top 15 at lightweight. Although that lightweight top 15 can be a real killer. Let's go to perhaps the upset of the night. Dustin Stoltzfus. And here's where I'm going to take my cap. If I was wearing one, I'm going to eat it. I really should, I have a cap somewhere over there. Maybe it's a PFL cap. PFL cap, or is it a Yankee hat? Oh no, it might be the Yankee hat. whichever one of those caps. I should have brought it over and just stuck it in my mouth because I was made to eat some crow. Because I, on the pre-show, was talking about Mansur Abdul Malik, and I said, you know what? There were a lot of questions surrounding his loss to Yusri Belgaroui, and I said, that's such a bad, I was crapping on people who were saying that Abdul Malik was fraud checked by Belgaroui because Belgaroui was a hell of a glory kickboxer, unsuccessfully challenged Alex Pereira twice, and on commentary they mentioned that he got a win over Pereira in a non-title fight. Actually, let me check Belgaroui's record. It might be a little bit of a tangent, but let me check Yusri Belgaroui's record and see in kickboxing, did he actually defeat Alex Pereira? Yeah, he did. He actually beat Alex Pereira at Glory 40 in the middleweight tournament. I forgot about that. I remember the 2 title fights that he had with him, Glory 49, Glory 55. Glory 55 was right here in New York. But he's got a win over Alex Pereira in kickboxing. Belgaroui's not a snub. Here, however, no offense to Dustin Solsus, yeah, Mansur Abdul Malik, fraud check. Absolute fraud check. Dustin Stolflutz, I know the line was very questioning. Like, I admit it, the line was a trap. DraftKings had it as a minus 110. But, and they had the decision at plus 200 or 210 or something like that. A lot of the debate around the sports books was about if the fight was going to end in a finish, because there were sports books and there were people out there that gave a respect to Dustin in that he is a tough competitor and that he is an experienced competitor. Maybe he would be able to test Mansur in going the distance with him. Well, Mansur failed that test tonight. And even then on the sports books, he was still, Dustin, a wide underdog. He was coming into this fight off the loss to Kelvin Gastelum at last year's Noche UFC event. It had been a while since we had seen Dustin. And maybe the thought was, this was the thought that I had, maybe this is going to be the veteran's going to do the JOB to the up-and-comer. It's going to be the rebound performance, the bounce-back performance that Mansur needed. Well, that didn't happen. And so I guess it's time for, I'm going to cover my ears, Mr. Morgeson, because it's time for that sound that sometimes makes me jump. Fraud check. Yeah. Nothing I can say at this point. I'll actually go over the fight. That would actually be beneficial for those who did not see the fight. He gave credit that Mansur was a beast. But the thing is, Stoltzfus had control of the fight from round 1. He tagged him, popped him with a right hand. Stoltzfus got the fight to the ground. Dustin got in mount. He threatened to end the fight with a TKO or submission. Strikes, chokes, one after the other. Then he got, Abdul Malik got a takedown early in the second round. He was trying to use his ground and pound, which he is very strong with. But then Dustin Stoltzfus turns things around. He gets Abdul Malik in trouble. He gets right to the back, and he actually locks in a really good choke and got the submission. It's probably your upset of the night. Actually, you know what? It's probably your number 2 upset of the night. There was a bout on the prelim card that I would say is your upset of the night. And then going on from that, I don't know what happens next with Mansur, but his stock as a prospect has actually, maybe there's a sound effect I could have used. Yes, here's Mansur's stock as a prospect right now. Bankrupt. All right, let's give a little bit of a thank you to an absolute legend in the cage. Ian Edson Barboza. Did he go out the way that he wanted to? Probably not. He got finished by Esteban Ribovic. Strong bounce back performance from Ribovic. He got the finish. I can at least be happy that Zan and I's lock of the week for our best bets ended up hitting with this one, because Ribovic ended up getting the finish. And I think it was actually a really perfect bet for Zan and I, because we didn't bet second round, but we said it was going to happen in the second round. So that was pretty cool. Barboza tried to get the fight going with his kicks. You know, we've seen him use his leg kicks. We've seen him use the spinning kicks. He tried a couple of spinning kicks in this fight, but ultimately nothing really helped him here. Ribovic just had, as I wrote in my recap for MMA News, he just had a perfect game plan. Zan and I talked about the need for Ribovic to pressure in this fight, to dictate the pace early. I talked about that in my Deadspin piece for the best bets, and Ribovic did just that. He pressured right away. His left hand constantly found the mark. Edson Barboza had a cut around one of his eyes, I believe right here. Blood trickling down. He even had a splint, a really bad splint. His right leg was busted open. And, you know, I thought maybe the corner should have stopped it. You know, I went on that whole rant. Oh, that wasn't a whole rant because we were running low in time, but I went on a whole written rant on Deadspin last week about last week's fight between Ty Miller and Billy Ray Goff. How the corner should have, you know, the corner who told Goff to just circle the cage and not do anything. You know, you should have just pulled your fighter out at that point. And you're looking at the fighter here, in this case with Barboza, and all the blood that's trickling out of him. I know his family's there. I know the fight, you know, the fans want to see him fight. I mean, this is a little bit more forgivable. I guess the idea of going down on your shield plays of significance in this kind of fight. I guess I would have felt comfortable if they had stopped the fight there. And so Herb Dean ends up having to intervene mere seconds into round two. Where is it? Oh, yeah, Ribovic got on the inside, started tagging Barboza again before the fight was called. I think he added in a couple of elbows. How long? It was a minute 32 seconds. For some reason, it felt shorter than that. I don't know why. But, I mean, good on Ribovic. That's another big win under his belt. You know, he's been looking to bounce back. He had lost in 2025, and that was after he and Daniel Zellhuber had the fight of the year in the Sphere in 2024. You know, this was a good win for Ribovic, and, you know, he wants to show why he is or should be ranked, why he should be a ranked contender. Now, let me, if you all will indulge me a moment, let me go to Aaron Broadstetter's Twitter, because he should have given a full media rundown as to everything that went down with Dana White's post-fight press conference. Oh, hold on. What's this? Oh, from Nolan King. Carlos Prates and Michael Morales found each other in the crowd after the UFC 330 main event and seemed to debate who's next for Islam Makhachev. Seems like they're recording it too. It seems like they're having a little bit of fun with that. It doesn't seem like, I mean, there's probably serious nature in that. I mean, you're talking about challenging for a championship, but it seems a little more lighthearted, if you will, I guess is the term. Let's go over to Bronstetter himself. Actually, another fun fact for our commenter who was talking about Islam Michael Morales matchup. Future odds. Aaron Bronstetter actually posted future odds for the fight, courtesy of Bet Online AG. He actually has odds for both Makhachev Prates and Makhachev Morales. Makhachev would enter both of those fights as a favorite over 200 points. Makhachev would be a minus 210 favorite versus Morales being a 180 underdog. Makhachev would be a minus 250 favorite against Prates. Prates would be a plus 207 underdog. Dana White speaking to the media. Okay. White says that if Machado Garry had even an ounce of killer instinct, he could have won. He did not like how cordial the fighters with one another. Feels Ian will regret his approach when he watches it back. On one hand, Dana White is right in that if he had fought a little smarter, I said it earlier, if he had fought a little smarter and used his distance management well, Ian Garry could have won this fight. But I feel like that's taken away from how Islam Makhachev is great. And on the other hand, I get it. If you saw some of the hype videos for this fight, they played into the Conor Khabib thing. The Conor Khabib fight from 8 years ago. No. Islam Makhachev and Ian Machado Garry are two different kind of fighters. This did not have the rivalry of Conor Khabib. You did not see 2 years worth of trading barbs. You did not see press conferences where one tried to, hurt one another. You did not see press conferences where it was just ramble of rant and trading shots at one another. No. Good God. I don't get it. Everyone was talking about this fight being the next Conor Khabib. No. That's such a stretch. Just because of the Irish blood, the Dagestani blood? Like, they're two different kinds of fighters, two different kinds of circumstances. Ian Machado Garry was not going into this fight on a 2-year hiatus. Islam Makhachev did not, no offense to him, did not go into this fight as an undefeated champion. This was not a fight that was 2-3 years in the making. This was a much different circumstance. And Dana White's own words from weeks ago was that you were never going to get another Conor McGregor in this sport. Now, I'm not going to go on a tangent about that for various reasons, and it's going off topic. Let me just get back here. White says that Makhachev controlled Garry and shut him down. He did exactly what he needed to do to win the fight. Yes, thank you. White says that for Islam to do what he did to a bigger fighter like Garry was impressive. He says that Ian assured Dana that he was one of the best in the world after the fight. He says that Ian is a classy guy, but when the fight starts, he needs to flip the switch. White says that he's a fan of Gillian Robertson and was surprised at how much Mackenzie dominated her both on the feet and on the ground. White says that tonight was an incredible win for Jeremiah Wells, getting a bonus and winning in his city. I'll talk about that in just a second. White says that Islam's win streak might not be beaten in his lifetime if he keeps fighting and building around the streak. We'll see. He's got a couple of tough dogs waiting him in Francis Morales. I think he can beat both of them, but we'll see. White says he loves Philadelphia and attending sports events there. He says that the UFC will be back sooner than the last time they did an event here. I wonder if they're going to get Nick Morgeson's favorite person in the world now, considering he's in Philadelphia. LeBron James. White says that there is no update on Weili Zhang's return, but he is excited to see her face Dern and hopes she returns soon. Okay, like I said before, we need that matchup for strawweight, and especially next, we need that. Mackenzie Dern, Weili Zhang. White says that Edson Barboza has been in so many wars and they really like him. He's an absolute savage and they respect him a lot. White says that if Makhachev didn't have the lone loss on his record, it would be a no-brainer that he'd be the greatest. He says to let his career play out and then make those determinations on his all-time status. I mean, your buddy John Jones isn't undefeated either, Dana. I know the one loss was kind of BS, but still. White says that usually it doesn't go well when second-generation fighters try to fight, but he believes Bella Mir will be an exception. She has big aspirations in combat sports. Those who don't know, Bella Mir is the daughter of Frank Mir, the former UFC heavyweight champion. She competed in wrestling. She's done grappling, I believe, and she's going to be competing this Tuesday in the main event of week 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. Dana has a teleprompter reading him the questions now. I'm not lying. Really? He's got a teleprompter? All right, I think I decompressed enough from finding that out. White says that he certainly hopes to see Kayla Harrison and Valentina Shevchenko defend their titles soon. He wants to make sure Harrison is 100% healthy, 110% healthy before she enters the cage, I guess because she's fighting Amanda Nunes. That is the other fact that I talked about on the pre-show with Sam. This is the first women's title fight of this year. We're already in mid-August. We need to see Valentina defend her title at least once this year, and we really need to see that Kayla Amanda fight. I'm gonna take you know what's weird? They announced stuff for 331 and 333. We haven't heard anything about 332 in Salt Lake at the start of October. Is there a chance maybe it happens on that card? Or maybe it ends up being the main event of the December card in Vegas or co-main event at the Garden? I don't know. Really interesting situation we've got with the women's title fight scene. Kind of disappointing on that. Noteworthy prelim performances. Let me pull up everything I've written for MMA News. In terms of the prelims, the LVP of the card is Chidi Njoku. Chidi Njoku and Joel Alvarez just did not have a good fight at all. It's completely one-sided. Charles Johnson, my man. Eduardo Henrique troubled him all throughout their fight. And he's got his back to the wall. And what does he do? The freaking Scottish Twister. We just saw the Scottish Twister about a month and a half ago on one of the UFC Apex cards. And now, here we are. Was it a UFC Apex card? Let me double check that. Let me fact check myself. UFC the Scottish Twister. Again, this is the Scottish Twister. Not counting the actual, Twister like you saw with Chan Sung Jung. Yeah, Murtazali Magomedov. And that took place, it looks like, at a UFC Vegas card. Oh, MMA Guru with a bad botch, calling Charles Johnson the first Scottish Twister in UFC history. Yeah, Murtazali Magomedov, that was June. That was the Apex. That was Vegas 120. Cool. So shout out to him. Charles Johnson's just a man. And like I said before with Zan on the pre-show, he's got to win over Joshua Van. So if Joshua Van retains his championship, and Charles Johnson keeps winning, maybe one day down the line we do see a Van Johnson rematch. I'm sure I agree with Zan in that I'm sure Van would love that win back. Dante Johnson, oh man, he brought the fire. And then to say he wants to win titles in 3 weight classes, I think Dante Johnson might have had a little too much coffee before entering the octagon today. Neil Magny, hey, my extra credit bet won. I said that Neil Magny and Ramiz, that fight wasn't going to go the distance. They both had strong finishing power. One of them was going to get finished. Neil Magny, man, still at his age, he's still winning. He's still finishing. And he's already pointing the finger at Jim Miller and saying, I'm coming for your UFC wins record. So that should be fun. And then Jeremiah Wells. Oralbai is pretty much controlling the action for 2 rounds. And then Jeremiah Wells just really brings it out and pulls off an absolutely fun. For a second, I thought my article on that disappeared. Okay, there we go. He was dominated. Oralbai was just controlling him, putting him against the fence, scoring on the takedowns. But on the third, one, we always say with the puncher's chance, it always takes one. Right hand, Oralbai gets rocked. He goes to counter, goes for another takedown because his grappling is working. What does Jeremiah Wells do? He's smart and realizes it, locks up the neck, scores the tap out with a ninja choke. Unbelievable comeback. Jeremiah Wells wants to be in the top 15, and he says if that's not going to happen, he's fine with retiring in his home of Philadelphia. Former CFFC champion. Credit to him. Great job. No fight of the night awarded, by the way. You have 4 performance bonuses instead, and those went to Jalen Turner, Dustin Solsuits, Charles Johnson, Jeremiah Wells. Yeah, I think that's the right call. I don't think anything was too good enough to be awarded a fight of the night, but you had some really strong performances from those four in particular: Jalen, Dustin, Charles, and Jeremiah. Dana and company, get it right. That was good. All right. I'm out of breath. I'm exhausted from today. That's going to do it for this edition of a UFC numbered card post show, the UFC 330 post show here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I want to thank all of you. Over 800 of you. I think we got to 810 at one point watching tonight's show. Thank you so much for tuning in, regardless of how long you watch, what you watch, if you interacted in the chat or not. I greatly appreciate you guys. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to come to the YouTube home. Those of you who are watching on X, hit like, hit repost, hit quote post, and then make sure to come to the YouTube home, youtube.com/ETV Network, and help us grow over here. We're over 3,000 watch hours, over 1,160 subscribers. Help us continue to blossom. We thank you so much for your support. Make sure to follow the show at Fight IQ ETV. Make sure to follow the network at ETV Network and follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. All right. Thank you all for tuning in to the UFC 330 post show. Hope you all had fun. Of course, UFC 331, September 19th in California. That's the next time we'll have a post show, obviously. And then, of course, join me on Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 out on the West Coast for the mothership, Fight IQ, where we will recap UFC 330. And we'll go over the announcements that happened tonight. You know, the announcements of UFC 333 and the card for that. Start talking about the road to UFC 331, the Brady Bonfim fight, Raul Rosas Jr. He got his next fight announced. We'll talk all about all of that on Monday's show. But until then, this is Tom Albano saying good night. Good night.